Rabbi Soloveitchik writes about in Halachic Man. It's either in the name of the Vilna Gaon or Reb Chaim. I forget who it's in the name of, but basically there was, some town that only had, they couldn't get estrogim shipped to them for Sukkot.
Mm.
So one very rich man in town got an estrog, and whichever rabbi the story is told about, the Vilna Gaon or Reb Chaim, um, wants to use the estrog to bench love an estrog. And the guy says, I'll let you do it if I can get your schar. And of course, what's schar? I have a chance to do a mitzvah. Schar is nothing. You can have my schar, sure. I think the Rav tells the story a little bit better, but that's the gist of it.
Yeah.
Hi, Beatrice.
Hello, I'm apologizing in advance that I'm going to have to leave early today.
Okay. All right. I already hit record, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so let's get the source sheet up and let's get started. We are in Sefer Vayikra. So every year we say how people bemoan Sefer Vayikra, that it's so boring and so difficult to make sense of because it's talking all about korbanot and we don't relate to korbanot, we don't understand them. There's some truth to those complaints. It's perhaps more challenging. It's certainly not the same stories that we've been used to. So it's a different type of safer. There's still some narrative stuff and some interesting things that go on. I think we generally succeed in finding some meaningful, hopefully interesting material to work around in Sefer Vayikra. And I hope that this year, we usually come to Sefer Vayikra in the lead up to Pesach, so it's just naturally on my mind. So there'll be some Pesach connections tonight, and maybe that'll be helpful for you. I hope so. But we're going to begin by looking at the very first pasuk in the parsha in the Sefer, which is Vayikra Hashem el Moshe, Vayidaber Hashem elav me ohel moed lemor. Hashem called to Moshe and spoke to him from the tent of meeting, saying. So in previous years, we spoke about the first word, Vayikra, and how in the Chumash, it's not reflected here, but in the Chumash, in the Torah scroll, it's written in a unique manner. The Aleph is Aleph Zera, a small Aleph, right? And so there's some interesting midrashim that talk about why the Aleph in Vayikra is small. Right, most famously, it contrasts it with Parshat Balak when Hashem speaks to Bilam. It says Vayikra, that Hashem happens upon Bilam, and so many commentators make the point that when Hashem speaks to Bilam, speaks to this the evil prophet, it's kind of in a happenstance way. But with Moshe, it's Vayikra. He calls him with purpose. Right, and there's a lot of other Torah, a lot of other explanations about the significance of Vayikra. And we're going to look at one of those alternative suggestions tonight. So Vayikra Hashem el Moshe, right? Not only is the word written strange, but it's also a little bit odd. We're used to seeing Vayidaber Hashem el Moshe. God spoke to Moshe. So what's the why Vayikra? What does it mean that God called to him? So the Medrash tells us something very interesting. Rabbi Tanchuma Patach, right? So the way that the Medrash often begins is, right, it tells us that a certain rabbi would introduce a section of the Torah by quoting from a different section of Tanakh. So Rabbi Tanchuma, when he would explain this opening of Sefer Vayikra, would quote the pasuk from Mishlei. Yesh zahav v'rav pninim, Ukliyakar siftei dat. So the pasuk in Mishlei says there is gold and an abundance of gems, but lips of knowledge are a precious vessel. What does this pasuk mean, and how does this introduce Sefer or Parshat Vayikra? B'nohag sheba'olam. Adam yesh lo zahav v'kesef avanim tovot umargaliot v'chol klei chemda sheba'olam. Right, the way of the world is that a person may have lots of riches, gold, silver, precious jewels, all the expensive things in the world. V'tova v'dat einbo, but he's lacking goodness and knowledge. Right, they're very common that the rich person isn't the ethical person, isn't the wise person, right? Has many shortcomings. Ma kinya yeshlo. So what does he have? Ma matla amar dea kanita ma chasarta, dea chasarta ma kanita. Right. So there's a mashal. There is a parable that says if you've acquired dea, if you've acquired knowledge, ma chasarta, what are you lacking? You're not lacking anything. Dea chasarta, but if you are lacking knowledge, ma kanita, what have you acquired? Yesh zahav, hakol heviu nidvatan lemishkan zahav, right? So there is wealth, there is gold. Everyone brought their gift of gold to the Mishkan. Harahu dichtiv v'zot truma, as it says, this is the truma, this is the gift, this is the offerings, the contributions that everyone brought. Rav pnimim, right? And lots of jewels. Zo nidvatan shel nesiim. This refers specifically to the contributions of the nesiim, of the tribal leaders. Dichtiv v'nesiim heviu, as it says that the nesiim brought. Um, they brought the stones for the Kohen Gadol's breastplate. Ukli akar siftei dat, but the most precious is lips of knowledge. What does this mean, or how does this fit into the uh, the the narrative of the Mishkan? Lefi shayata nafsho shel Moshe aguma alav. Moshe was very troubled. V'amar kol hiviu nidvatan leMishkan v'ani lo hiveti. Said everyone contributed to the Mishkan, and I haven't given anything. Right? Interestingly, right, the Medrash that we've quoted many times says a similar thing about the Nisim. Right? If you remember,
Yes.
it's written Hanasiim Heviu. It doesn't the oh, even in the Medrash, in the Midrash it says, right, Nasiim, if you can see my mouse, right, is written without the yud. Right? It should be Nun Sin Yud Aleph Yud Mem, right? So here it's missing it twice.
Mhm. Yeah.
Right, and so the Medrash says that the Nasi, why is it written Chaser without the Yud? Because they initially didn't bring anything. They said, everyone's there. There's this capital campaign going on. If there's one thing we know about the Jewish people is that they're never going to meet the stated goal of the campaign. So we'll be the heroes. Whatever's lacking, we'll sweep in and can complete the drive and give what's missing. But the people, the nation was so generous and gave so much that Moshe had to say, stop giving. It's too much already. And there was nothing left for the Nesiim to give. They were very upset. So Hashem sort of created a new opportunity or rearranged things so that they could contribute in some way. So interestingly, now the Medrash says that Moshe had a similar feeling of being left out, of not being included. It doesn't criticize Moshe in the same way. It doesn't say that he was waiting or inappropriate in not having given, but he didn't give. Amara everyone gave their contributions, and I haven't given anything. Amarlo HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Chayecha shediborcha chaviv alai yoter minakol. So God says to him, I swear to you, Moshe, your speech is more precious to me than anything else. Shemikulan lo kara hadibor ella leMoshe. Because this communication, the speech with God was only to Moshe. Vayikra el Moshe, that's the significance of Vayikra el Moshe. Beautiful. There's a big problem with this. It's a big textual problem with this with the Medrash. And so the Medrash says that Moshe was upset. He didn't have an opportunity to contribute anything to the Mishkan. It says no, Moshe did contribute because he spoke directly with God, and that's what's indicated by Vayikra el Moshe. What's the problem? Hashem tells Moshe, Diborcha chaviv alai. Your speech is precious to me. Your speech indicates that who's speaking?
Moshe.
Moshe.
Yeah.
So how is Vayikra el Moshe a good proof of Moshe's speech? Vayikra el Moshe, who's speaking?
Hashem is calling.
Hashem is calling Moshe. Hashem is speaking. So there's something a little bit off, right? It's not it doesn't quite fit so perfectly. Yeah, we could okay, Vayikra, they were in conversation maybe, but it's a little bit right, it doesn't seem to totally fit. So we'll keep that question in the back of our mind. But anyway, the Medrash tells us that Moshe's contribution is his speech. Is right, whether it's his speech, and it doesn't tell us exactly, was it his speech in communicating to the people, to the nation, what was needed, and communicating to Bezalel what Bezalel should do. Maybe it was his speech when everything came together, as we saw in last week's shir, and the dedication, and the bracha that Moshe gave them. It's not clear which speech is precious to God, but Moshe somehow spoke.
There's an expression, has a Yiddish basis, perhaps, that somebody speaks, everything he says is gold.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
if the
I think
matter
that's in
is,
English too, right? We say,
yeah,
yeah,
pearls come out of his mouth all the time,
yeah,
that kind of thing.
yeah.
Gold and pearls and all the gems and everything else, so that some people, what they say is worth more than what other people might bring in the way of cold cash or jewelry.
Okay, okay, yeah, definitely. All right. So one possible explanation is from the Medrash Rabbah and Devarim. Okay, so this is a little bit far afield, but I promise you it'll make. I hope it'll make sense. Okay, so the Medrash, the Devarim Rabbah. Let me give you the English on your screen. Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu re'ei lashona shel Torah ma chaviva shemirapeh et halashon. Hashem says the language of Torah is so precious. Why? Because it heals the tongue. It cures the tongue. Minayin, how do we know this? Shekein ketiv marpei lashon eitz chaim. Because another pasuk in Mishlei says a healing for the tongue is the tree of life. In eitz chaim ela Torah, and we know that eitz chaim refers to Torah. Shne'amar eitz chaim hilama chazikim ba. We sing every Shabbos. L'shona shel Torah matir et lashon. And the language of Torah, literally matir, like sets free the tongue. Right? Know that in the future, God will cause to grow from Gan Eden very beautiful, praiseworthy trees. Umahin Shivchan, what is so beautiful and praiseworthy about these trees? Shehin Marpin et Halashon, because they will cure the tongue. Shene Amar, Al Nachal Yaleh Al Svato Mizeh Mizeh, it says by the river it will rise up on either side. How do we know that this indicates healing of the tongue? It's fruit. It says in Yecheskel that the fruit will be for eating and the leaves for healing. Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Chad Amar Latar Payon, V'Chad Amar Koshu Ilim Velo Eitimenu L'Shono Mitrape. Right. So one says it's some sort of medicinal thing, and one says that no, anyone who is mute, can't speak, and eats from this tree or uses these leaves will be able to speak. Immediately speak words of Torah. Shekach ketiv mizeh umizeh ve'im mizeh mizeh el Torah. It says mizeh umizeh. The tree is going to grow on either side, and mizeh umizeh refers to Torah. Shne'emar mizeh umizeh heim ketuvim. It says that by the luchot that they were written on either side. Right, you could read it no matter which side of the tablets you were looking at. Okay, interesting. And Rabbi Levi says, what is all this? Rabbi Levi Omer, why do we need to bring all these crazy psukim from Mishlei and Yecheskel and where else do we bring from Yirmiyahu, from Yecheskel? Why do we need all this? Yomad mimkomo. Learn from the very source. Hari Moshe ad shelo zacha l'Torah ketivo lo ish dvarim anochi. Before Moshe merited the Torah, what does he say about himself? He says, Lo ish dvarim anochi. I'm not a man of words. Right? That's when Hashem appears to him at the burning bush and says, Go speak to Paro. You're going to be the one to bring the people to free the nation. Moshe says, Not me. I can't speak to Paro, right? So Hashem makes a compromise. He sends Aaron. Aaron will speak for you. But right, we have it directly in the Torah. Once Moshe received the Torah, his tongue was healed, and he started to speak. Minayin, shekarinu ba'inyan, Eila hadvarim asher diber Moshe. Because Sefer Devarim opens with Eila hadvarim asher diber Moshe. The same Moshe who at the beginning of his career said, I can't speak, right? I stumble, aral spatayim, right? All these things that prevent him from speaking. By the end of his career, we have an entire book in the Chumash, which is Moshe's words. So what caused the change from the beginning till the end? He received the Torah. He learned Torah. The Torah healed him. That's the medrash, okay? And I think I know I spoke about this once on a Shabbos in the shul. Many, there's many different ways that many different lessons, many different applications that are used. But maybe we could use this to suggest that the words Moshe's right diburecha chaviv alai, when Hashem says to Moshe in our first medrash that your speech is precious to me, Hashem is showing it means the growth that Moshe went through. The fact that you're able to speak Moshe is precious to me. The fact that you didn't remain stuck in your place, that you overcame the difficulty and the disability that you had, right? That's what's precious. I'll pause. Any thoughts, questions on that?
Is there any difference implied with the shift from Vayidaber in the first pasuk to Lemor at the end there in regard to the preciousness of this speech?
There
'cause
very
Lemor-
well may be. Nothing that I saw.
Mhm.
But there very well may be, right? Meaning, what were you thinking something? More means that, right, you're going to say exactly what God said? Or okay. Okay, yeah, I can definitely see that. I'm sure that there are those who write about it, and maybe if I was focused on Sefer Devarim, I would come across those commentaries. So I'm sure that people say something along those lines. Baruch
It seems to
Shekivant.
me that Lemor is usually thought to be a dearer form of speech, right? That it takes into account directly the person with whom one is speaking, things
Yeah.
like that, right?
Yeah.
No, so I don't know. The Rebbe does speak about it, but he uses a word like he's addressing. The translation, God instructed Moshe to address the people in a manner that would inspire them to value the commandments and to inform them that he
This
was
is on
giving them,
Vayikra,
so
or
on
this
and
is on
so on,
Vayikra?
just off
Sorry.
of the word lay more. All of this
Okay.
off of the word lay
Okay,
more. Yeah.
lay more. Okay.
So there is that. But I was just thinking that if you're going to key in on that word dearer, that it would be a good example of that
Yeah.
too,
Okay. Beautiful. Okay. So let's go on to the next one, which is the Shemi Shmuel, the second Sakachover. So the Shemi Shmuel begins by quoting our Medrash from the beginning of Vayikra. We don't need to read the whole thing again. Right? So Ani Amar Lakash Baruch Hu Chayecha Shedibracha Chaviv Alai Yoter Min Hakol. Right? So Hashem says to Moshe, your speech is more precious to me than anything else. Hashem Mikalan Lo Kara Hadibor Ela Moshe, right? Because only Moshe was given the speech. Vayikra Moshe. That's why it says, right? God called to Moshe. Yesh Lahavin. So he has two questions. Lama lo hevi. Number one, why did Moshe not bring any gifts as part of the campaign to gather materials for the Mishkan? Umi ikev al yado, right? Im hayalo tam bedavar bitchila my kasavar levasof my kasavar, right? And what prevented him? And if he had good reason not to bring at the beginning, but once he has the remorse, so why didn't he step up and bring something then? Once he felt regretful. So those are the questions he asks. And then if we skip down and again, just flip the page over if you're on the source sheet, but right, so that was paragraph Aleph, right? We're skipping down to paragraph Vav. He quotes his father, the first Lakachavar, the Avnei Nezer. Ulefi hadvarim ha'elu yuvan shuvat Hashem yivarach Moshe Rabbeinu Malach Hashalom diborcha chaviv alay yoter mehakol. Right, we can understand Hashem's response to Moshe. Your speech is more precious to me than anything else. Shamati mikvod kedushato avi adumar, based on what I heard from my father. V'hafresh shabin amira l'dibor. He makes a distinction between amira, lemor, saying, and dibor, speaking. What's the difference between saying and speaking? Amira hi etzem hama'amar haba mizeh lizeh. Saying is, I think it's best described with kind of like when you're reading a comic, a cartoon, right? Amira is the words that go from one person, right? Is the
Conversation.
actual words. But it's the actual words that go, right? That I say something, so you're all hearing me say something, but right, the Amira is the words, is the content of what I'm saying. Right. So if you picture like a comic where the word you see the speech bubble and the actual words come out. That's Amira. V'dibur huachibur hamidaber im hamikabel hadibur. Dibur is the connection formed between the speaker and the hearer and the recipient. The alkane tomar Ruvain amar l'Shimon, and that's why we say Ruvain said to Shimon. You would never say Ruvain said with Shimon. Right? There's no relationship formed if all that's happening is Amira, if all that's happening is saying. Aval b'dibor tu chalomar Ruvain diber im Shimon. When it comes to speech, you could say Ruvain spoke with Shimon. Shezem orechibor Ruvain im Shimon. And this shows that there is a connection, a relationship between Ruvain and Shimon. Okay, so the dibur is and again we have to ask. So back to our medrash, right? Is when Hashem says to Moshe, "Diborcha chaviv alai," your speech is precious to me. Does he mean speech between Moshe and Hashem, or Moshe's speech with the Jewish people? Which speech is it referring to?
Both.
Both. Easy
And
answer.
further,
Easy answer.
Remember the famous passage of Moshe going up and down the mountain and trying to set things up for the giving of the Torah. So he goes back and he tells Hashem what the people have said. So that's another reason why Moshe's words are dear, because he's bringing to Hashem what the people have said.
Right.
Perhaps.
Okay. Yeah, so but I'm in that imagery, I wonder if that's more like Amir, like Moshe is just kind of bringing the content of the words from one to the other. Right? We would expect that the people could have spoken directly to Hashem, right? Why does Moshe serve as the intermediary? I'm not sure. But
Well, but we have that famous problem. I know you and I've discussed it, where the extra day is added, and
yeah.
according to the Midrash, it's because the people say we want to see Hashem. We're really longing for Hashem. So it is the leader's consciousness of what the people are doing, and Hashem kind of wants to know whether Moshe really got what they said too. In the process of all of that.
Okay.
very interesting kind of
Okay.
communication.
Yeah, I hear it. Right. So interesting. So we have this, right? That Hashem tells Moshe that what's precious to me is your dibor, because dibor implies the ability not only to convey information, but to forge a deep relationship. Right. And so then we ask the question, is that relationship that's so precious, is it the relationship that Moshe has with Hashem, or is it the relationship of Moshe and the Jewish people? I think you're right to say it's both, right? That there certainly is an element of both. But right to think about how that might play out is I think an interesting thought, an interesting question. Anything else on this? So I'm going to skip ahead and then we'll come back to number 7. But Rav Asher Weiss, you know, not talking about this, but I think helps us to see this in an interesting light for Pesach. With Asher Weiss, right? He's one of, if not the top rabbis alive in the world today. He was born in Brooklyn. He lives in Israel now. He's often quoted, and he spans communities. He's respected. He's a gadol in the Haredi community. He has good relations, good ties with the modern Orthodox Dati Leumi community. He speaks English, so he's well regarded and well off quoted in America as well. A true giant. And so he is talking about Pesach, and the mitzvah, the essential mitzvah of Pesach is the mitzvah of Sipor Yetziat Mitzrayim, telling of the Exodus from Egypt. Right. So he raises a halachic question. Is generally when we have mitzvot that require speech, we have a rule shomea ke'oneh. Right. Shomea ke'oneh means if I hear someone saying the mitzvah, speaking the words, and I answer amen, and I have kavana to be yotze, and they have kavana to be motzi me, so then that works, right? So I don't have to right? I don't have to read Kriyas HaTorah. I don't have to read Megillat Esther. I can hear someone else read it, and I fulfill my obligation 100%, as if I said it myself. So he is dealing with the question, is there a mitzvah that does Shomea Ka'ona apply to the Haggadah?
Mm.
Okay, that's the question. When it comes to the Haggadah, to the mitzvah to tell the story, does Shomea Ka'ona work? Hanireh b'zeh ikar u'be'emet, ein din Shomea Ka'ona b'mitzvat sipor, that should be sipor.
Sipur.
Oh no, Kamit,
Sipur Yetziat Mitzrayim.
yeah, sipor, right? Not tipor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Indeed,
I think this got messed up. I think the Hebrew got messed up. Okay, let's just go to the English. Sometimes that happens when you cut and paste. It doesn't. Okay, sorry. There is no halacha of Shomea Ka'ona when it comes to the telling of the Exodus from Egypt. In truth, the essential mitzvah is to tell others, but the Torah expanded it to say that even if he cannot tell others, he must tell himself, right? That's an off-quoted, right? Not only, right, if you're, a situation where you're, we spoke about this in Corona, if you're in quarantine, or whatever, for whatever reason, you're by yourself on Pesach night. So you still, right, the Rambam famously says you have to pose questions to yourself, and you have to engage in this mitzvah of Sipor, of telling of the exodus of Egypt. What does it mean to tell? There's no one to tell. There's no one else there. But yet we have this mitzvah of Sipor. The essence of the mitzvah is not necessarily to tell, but to make it heard to others. If that is so, then there is no element of Shomea Ke'oneh, right? Because the mitzvah isn't, Shomea Ke'oneh is an issue when there's a requirement to say specific words. No, but Shomea Ke'oneh means if the mitzvah is to say the words of Megillat Esther, and I didn't say the words, but I heard someone else say the words, it's as if I said them.
Right.
right? So the mitzvah, shomea ka'ona is a question or a principle when there is a specific requirement to say the words,
Okay.
to say specific words. Here, the mitzvah isn't to say the specific words, but it's to make the words be heard by others. It's not, the mitzvah isn't the speech. That's what he's saying. You don't have, it's like saying women aren't obligated in pruavu, right? But men are. So how do you have pruavu without women? You don't, right? There's no mitzvah on women to procreate, right?
A hypothetical based on? Is that what you're saying?
So
Like it's
but
a hypothetical?
it's not a hypothetical, but meaning it's not a for the you can't get to the end results without the articulation of the words. But the articulation of the words isn't right. What would happen? I don't know what Rav Asher Weiss would say about this, but right, what if and you did it in a halachically permissible way? You hit the play button before Yontif begins, and you have a recording. I was going to say a tape, but no one uses tapes anymore. You have a recording of the Haggadah, and
Sure,
so
halacha would make us use the tape.
fine, whatever. There's a recording of the words of the Haggadah going on. So no one, right? There's no person saying it, but you hear the words being said. So that doesn't work with Megillat Esther because the mitzvah is to read from the Megillah. But here, if it's just to hear the words of the Haggadah said, maybe it would work. But what's the point of this? So the parameters of the mitzvah are as follows. One person tells and the others listen, and they all together fulfill their obligation. It doesn't mean that we're just standing on the rooftops crying out for, whatever. What it means is that we have to be engaged in conversation. And so not everyone has to say every word because a dialogue isn't a give and take. So by me being present at the Seder table and hearing Avi say the words of what Yetziat Mitzrayim was, telling the story, I'm giving him an audience. And by giving him an audience, we're creating that conversation. Right?
Like the
Obviously,
opposite of Lashon Hara. Right? It takes
exactly.
two to tango.
Exactly. And he actually says that maybe the only analogous mitzvah might be Lashon Hara, where right, the listener also bears responsibility. Right? Even if I don't say anything bad, but I listen, so then I'm also guilty of Lashon Hara. The only others, he says, maybe Birkat Kohanim works in a similar way, right? Where there's no mitzvah on me to say anything, I just have to hear it, but that there has to be an audience, right? The Samach Me'al B'nai Israel, that if there is no Kihila, then there's no purpose for the Kohanim to say it. But fundamentally, there is no Shomea Ka'oneh because there is no real, it's not that every individual has to say the words of the Haggadah. The Haggadah fundamentally is about forming this dibor that we saw before, forming this relationship. And so by being present and being an audience for someone else to reflect upon the Pesach story, I am participating in the mitzvah. Is that clear?
Mhm. Mhm. It's also not quite the same, right, as the mitzvah of teaching in Mishnah, where a person has to be certain that the other one truly understands it. That isn't really added here.
Right, right. So that's an interesting question,
It's
right? I mean, if I sit total passively and only listen, right, and don't participate, obviously, what Asher Weiss is saying is hoping that this will lead to a genuine conversation, right? And that the point is, yeah, between everyone gathered, you should say the words of the Haggadah. He's not saying don't say the words of the Haggadah, but that it's, Haggadah is a platform to create for a richer conversation. And so even if you're not the person leading the Seder, or you're not the one saying every word, you can still play a part. And by giving others an opportunity and space and platform to reflect, that is part of the mitzvah as well. And so it becomes much more of a dialogue and a conversation, I think very much akin to what the Sagachavar was saying, the Shemi was saying about Dibor as opposed to Amira.
I like that. I think there's probably both mitzvot, right? So even if we're saying that, like, there's a mitzvah of telling and there's a mitzvah of hearing, and you can get both, you can get everything, but like just because you're not getting one doesn't mean you shouldn't get the other. So you could talk to the wall and you'd still get like half of the intention. So do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. But if you're by yourself, right, right. Um, right. But yes, I think so. I think so. Okay. One more step in all this. And this is also very much this is a Pesach idea, but I think related to what we've seen so far. This is again, this is an often quoted idea. The Maor Vashemesh, he's using very archaic, dense references to Kabbalah, to mystical ideas. Um, maybe we'll just say it outside more than anything else. But right, there's an idea in the Kabbalah in the that part of the galus, part of the shibud of the servitude and the exile of Egypt was literally the servitude of the language of the mouth, right? That part of what
Hmm.
Paro did was strangled, right? In the writings of the Rizal, it says that the stronghold of Paro was in subjugating the throat. Paro has the same letters as strangle, la'arof, right?
Egala Rufa.
Hmm.
Yeah, Eglarufa, because he had a stronghold on the neck. This is because all externalities, their purpose is to confuse Israel from worshiping God. Paro's goal was to prevent the voice that comes from the depths of the throat from becoming speech by confusing them with lies, so they would be enslaved to the evil inclination by virtue of not speaking with holiness. So Paro, right, and again, there's a million permutations of this. Right, but that part of the characteristic of being a slave is not being able to speak your mind freely, not being able to give voice to your experience. So paro, right, and then he says that paro could be read as pe ra, literally bad or evil mouth.
Mm,
And contrast that with what we often say, the name of the holiday is, even though the Torah tells us Chag HaMatzot, but we
Pesach.
call it Pesach, which is Pesach, mouth that speaks. So we overcome Paro's desire to silence the Jewish people and to subjugate our language, right, by celebrating Pesach, which is all about our speech and our being able to tell the story and to freely use our language in our mouth. Right? This is why Paro has the same letters as Perah, evil mouth. His entire goal was to bring the speech of their mouths to evil or evil inclination. Right? And this is what Moshe means when he says, I'm heavy mouthed and heavy tongued, how will Paro listen to me? The essential redemption is to redeem speech from exile. It is currently in exile, in which case, how will Paro listen to me that I can redeem through my speech to him if speech is in exile under his rule? Okay, so we come to Pesach, and then some point out that it goes even a step further because what happens as the holiday progresses and we come to Shvi'i Shel Pesach, what event do we celebrate on the seventh day of Pesach?
Hello.
Yeah. Oh,
Okay.
I see
we
that.
cel we celebrate Kriyas Yamsuf, the
Oh,
splitting of the sea. And what happens at Kriyas Yamsuf?
we sing?
Az Yashir Moshe Bnei Israel. It's not only that we
You
have
sang.
that we've
Mhm.
gained the capacity for language and for speech, but now we can sing, right? So as we become freer and more distance and more removed from Paro's enslavement in his hand, so we our speech takes on another level. It becomes song, it becomes poetry, it becomes something much deeper. Um, and so we began by looking at Sefer, the Medrash from Vayikra, which said Hashem says to Moshe, Diborcha Chaviv alai yoter min hakol. Your speech, your dibor, is most precious to me than anything else. We asked what that might mean. So on the one hand, we see, right, and maybe I did this out of order, right? But we see perhaps it could mean Moshe's personal growth, Moshe's growth from being a person who says Lo ish dvar manochi to being at the end of his career Eila hadvarim asher diber Moshe. That Moshe becomes someone who is, whose words become words of Torah, right? On a national scale, we see that in that Paro tried to subjugate Bnei Israel through their speech, and only when we overcome and find the ability to speak and articulate our true experience, our true selves, as embodied by the name, by the holiday Pesach, and then that we continue to grow and flourish till we get to a point of being not just speaking but shira, to sing. And then the final permutation of this is the distinction made by the Shem Mishmor, where we said that Dibor Chad, God says to Moshe specifically, your Dibor, your speech, because Dibor indicates the ability to join together and forge a relationship. And so Moshe forged a relationship between himself and Hashem, and he forged a relationship between himself and the Jewish people. And Anne suggested maybe we could see Moshe as also having been the conduit, the one who helps Bnei Israel enter into that relationship with Hashem as well. Very beautiful, and that takes on significance for Pesach as well, because we see that from Rav Asher Weiss that the goal, the mitzvah of the sipur, of the speech on the Seder night, is not to simply articulate a specific set of words, but it's to be in relationship and to enable others, right, even to be the listening ear without participating, without contributing, without speaking, but to give others and to listen intently to what others are saying. So then we enter into that relationship, into that dibor, um, and we're able to hopefully bring the conversation at the Seder table to a much higher level.
Beautiful.
Any final questions or lingering thoughts?
I can't help but report on an article, I think it was in the Jewish Times, or perhaps it was in the Baltimore Jewish Home, on the research on the influence of screens
Mm-hmm.
on the ability of children to learn how to read. If they are not reading together with their parents, they don't learn enough about how words can pass between two people, how emotion is expressed within a voice, how a relationship is furthered by that, all of those things too. And the research recently that was done made sure to just take screen time altogether. They weren't concentrating specifically on the program that the parent may have put in. They did do some of that, where they'll learn to read by reading from a screen, because but this was beyond that. It was just being on screens altogether was the factor that made it so hard for them to learn how to read. And then we can ask, well, do they know how to really engage in conversation with one another? That whole issue. So our
The answer is
children's
no.
the answer is no. Our children's speech is in exile. I think it's a very
Interesting.
important thing to know, and that's why the mitzvah of the hearing is particularly between a parent and a child, and that paradigm, it struck me, the parallel between that and this other research, and how important our seders truly are for so many, many reasons.
Wow, beautiful. Thank you. All right, I think that's a great ending point. I'm going to say Lila Tov. Thank you, Anne. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
Have
Rabbi.
a good
Wow.
night, a good rest of the week. I hope
Thank you.
all all tornadoes have passed, and
Mm.
I think another 1 or 2 days of cold, and then it gets warm again, maybe for good. Let's hope.
Let's
Uh,
hope.
let's
Right.
hope. All right. Have a good rest of the week, everyone.
Thank
You
you,
too.
Rabbi.
Thank you.
I was told.
Bye. Let's
Thank you
hope.
so much. Yeah.